Everybody, welcome to the 13th episode of the Futureworlds Metaverse podcast, where we try to talk to people that are really active in the metaverse space, building, developing, connecting. It's still very early days, as most of you guys probably know, and we're trying just to figure out where we are and work with people that are making sense and that have breadth across the space. Our guest today is Kimberly Knoller. She's with the Knoller Group, previously with Pixel Links, and has a very, I think, illustrious career through the music space. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to welcome her to the show and thank you for taking the time today, Kimberly.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Looking forward to a good conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's start out with some background because I know that you've got a pretty deep background in the music space. I've got some music background, but I don't think we've actually crossed paths so much. Maybe we have somewhere, but tell me where you started out.
Oh, wow. So I started out in radio, actually. So during college, I was a DJ all through college. So paying the bills by doing those overnight shifts and watching all the record guys come in and pitch their records on a regular basis. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. What do those guys do? And figured out they were promotion people. And so graduated college and thought I was going to go to law school, and then decided to go be an assistant at Capitol Records in the promotion department. So that was the start
In Hollywood.
in Hollywood. And, growing up in LA and passing the tower as a kid, I used to say, I'm going to work there someday. So, I'm a manifester, so be careful what you wish for. So that was my first gig, and learned how to call radio and learned how to get people to play records. And so really kind of had a career in promo and did that at Geffen for a while and got to work some great records at Geffen.
Eddie Rosenblatt.
Eddie Rosenblatt, yep.
I love Eddie.
Eddie's great teacher. Learned a lot from Eddie, learned so much from that team at Geffen, and worked on some incredible bands like Nirvana and Counting Crows. And I just think, what a great time that was. So
wait, let's stop there for 1 second. What's
okay.
it like being a woman in the promotions business? Because if anybody doesn't know, the record business as a whole is very male dominated. I'd say it's 95% men and 5% women, but promotions in particular, other than the fact that you're a attractive female, is generally male driven, and it's a boys club, right? I mean, what was your experience there?
It's a boys club. It was, and certainly, I like to think a lot has changed. And I hope it continues to change, but we still see it in the charts and we still see it at the executive level that it's still a bit of a boys club, although it is changing. It was what it was. And, I learned just to stand my ground and say what I wanted to say, and, knock on wood, I guess I opened some doors and broke down some walls and some barriers at the time, but
And you get a thick skin, right? I mean, it forces you to have to be able to fight for yourself, represent yourself. I used to manage Stone Temple Pilots on Atlantic, and I will say that Atlantic was one of the few labels that seemed to have almost all female department heads, maybe with the exception of sales. I think Rick Florio, I remember, was the head of sales there at one point, Pete Anderson, but radio, publicity, video, marketing, almost every other department head was a female, which I thought was pretty cool and definitely changed the vibe of that label compared to artists I had on, say Warner Brothers or Sony or somewhere else. So I don't know if you experienced that at all, or were you still the only woman in a field of guys?
No, I think there was some. I would think it, particularly in promotion, there were some women at the time. Maybe not local promotion folks, not a lot of women, but it wasn't. A handful we're talking about, right? Less than a handful.
You
So
know them
let's
all,
be real.
right?
When we say a lot, let's just be real. It's like, maybe a handful. But yeah, so you learn how to have thick skin, how to take a punch. You learn how to pick up the phone and tell someone like, play my freaking record, or So I guess I learned, if the door's not open, go through the window. If the window's not open, go through the chimney. If the chimney's not, working, break the wall down. And so I have great promo stories from
I'm
over the
sure you
years.
do.
But at one point I was like, I need to do something different. Promo wasn't going to be the path for me. And ended up going to Columbia Records and did international marketing. And I thought that was really probably one of my most favorite gigs at the time, because I think you really got to learn about how the record business works. And, you know, when you do international at a label, you really get a big whole perspective on the business. And so did
Plus, you
that.
get a bunch of T&E expenses, right? You get to fly to London first class every couple of weeks.
Yeah, or you get to fly with Aerosmith was my I was their marketing director, so you got to fly on those private jets. So those days were fun back in the day.
Yep.
But yeah, so it was a good time. But yeah, and then I had my own company for a while. God, we're gonna go way back here. And then I was at Warner Records and I built out the direct to consumer team at Warner Records, which I really think set the tone for my going down the Web3 rabbit hole years later, because really that understanding of having direct relationships between artists and fans was key. And, you know, I think Web3 now provides a lot of the tools that didn't exist for that.
100%.
So
who ran that? Did you run that department, or who were you working with? Because I didn't even know they had a direct to consumer department.
yeah, so Tom Wally brought me in, and so Jeremy was there, who I think you know Jeremy. Yeah.
Yes, very well.
So yeah, so that was great. It was a great time, and everybody was figuring out what that looked like, and the group was figuring out what that looked like, and we were figuring out what that looked like at the time. And you know, sort of how, like, kind of you had new media, and then this you know, everybody was doing these 360 deals, but how did you execute on those deals? And so Tom brought me in at the time to help execute on those deals, and that's what we were trying to build out. And so now, fast forward to now, and you just think about things like community and fan engagement, and you know, particularly around what tokens and NFTs can provide in that context. It's so great to have that knowledge, because how much things have changed. A lot of things have stayed the same. We just have better tools. So
yeah, I had Jeremy on the podcast. He was, I think, the second episode. I've known him forever, and I don't know about your story, but he came out of like almost being an intern.
Oh yeah, he's got a great story.
And yeah, but it's like no one else knew what to do, right? There was, like you said, no one knew. It was all brand new, super nascent space. And it was like anybody that had any kind of knowledge at all, they just lumped together and said, you can like wire a LAN. Okay, you're going to set up our Ethernet network or whatever. And it was just all crazy times. And out of that came deal structures that hadn't been in place before, like you said. The ability to work, I think, more with brands. And I know there's a couple startups. Gary Gersh's company was one, and John Silva's company, which I thought were way ahead of their time. Rick Rubin and Mark Geiger with Artist Direct. There's a number of companies that were in that space early that did not progress, I think, because they were early. And there wasn't some of the infrastructure and bandwidth available. Like streaming didn't exist back then, right? For you to hear a song, you usually had to download it on whatever broadband you had, and it was ridiculously slow. And this is all pre-mobile device, really pre-iPhones. So it wasn't quite the world that we live in now. But so you went from promotions to digital strategy, which in itself isn't.
Well, I went from promotion to international.
International, that's right.
Well, it's funny that you bring up about Artist Direct and broadband and all that. So kind of in the interim of being at Columbia for a while, and then the first sort of round of the .coms, there was a company called EVO. It was the first user-generated content platform.
Pre-YouTube.
Yes, so I'm really dating myself here. And we actually structured a deal with Artist Direct, and it was, again, you know, we talk about user-generated content now as if it's this whole new concept, but we did a user-generated content contest with Counting Crows, and you got to make your own Counting Crows video. So we gave you the song. We partnered with, I actually think that one was with Farm Club, if you remember Farm Club. So we partnered with
Jimmy's Farm Club, of course.
Yeah. So we partnered with Farm Club. We got a track from Counting Crows, and fans got to submit their own videos. And at the time, we were digitizing those. So people were sending us the VHS. We were digitizing them, and then we were putting them up on this platform, because you couldn't upload video then. And so Yeah, so we were talking UGC before the buzz term of UGC today.
How did that go? Just coincidence? I mean, how incidentally, how did that turn out? There must have
Yeah,
been a winner. I'm sure you gave them like a free tour of Farm Club or something, right? Or they got to go
yeah,
to a
I don't
farm.
remember what the prize was, but yeah, but it was like a big thing at the time. It was like make your own music video, and basically here's all the assets. Knock yourself out, and people sent in videos, and it was great, and you know, sort of first of its kind at the time. So
So where
now
did
it's in,
go ahead, finish that
no,
off.
go on, that's all right.
I was going to say, so where do you go from Warner's? Do you go? I mean, I know Pixelinks is kind of where we're going with this, but where do you go from Warner's Digital to where do you go from there?
So after Warner, I had this like, you know, as a manager, I just always felt like artists would come in and there were very few good artist managers when you're sitting at a label, and you just see like you have this passion for these developing artists that don't get the time of day, either because they have young managers or managers that have no idea. And I thought, well, I've kind of had a bunch of roles at a label. I've been in promotion, I've been in marketing, I've been in direct to fan, I've been in international. I'm going to be a manager. And everybody was like, that's crazy. Don't do that. You can go, go get a big exec job. I'm like, no, I just feel like I could find a band and do this. And I sort of felt like at the time, this was the last thing I wanted to do in the music business, which is so funny now, was find a band and blow them up and, do that. And so
It's
I
fun,
did
right?
that. What's that?
It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. And then it's not fun. So I found this band, Echo Smith, and I signed them to Warner, which was ironic after
So
that.
ironic.
And
Who was the
then
A&R person? Tom Wally?
no, gosh, it was Cavallo, and then it was it was Mike Elizondo who
Ah,
originally signed them,
okay.
but who was leading the company at the time was Cavallo, and
Yep.
then it was Dan after that. So signed Echo Smith. Long story short, top 5 single, really great. And then they went on kind of to do the rest of their thing with their dad. And then I decided like, okay, well, let me see, I'll do this again. Let me see if I can do this again. Found another band, The Regrets, also signed them to Warner.
What do you
Um,
know?
yeah, and they, they're still great, a great band, had a lot of success. But again, that kind of grind of building a story for a band, which is the hardest thing to do. People, I don't think, realize that if you're starting at zero, I always say the first 10,000 fans, like that's the hardest thing to do. So, helped them build their touring story. They went out with 21 Pilots. That was all great. And then during the pandemic, I kind of felt like, what is next? Touring's gone. Who'd ever thought that was going to be something that went away? I mean, as you know, obviously as a manager, if you didn't have a hit record, but you built a touring story, there's still a business. And then all of a
Forever.
sudden, yeah. And then all of a sudden there's no business. So,
Right.
and that's when this whole Web3 rabbit hole started. And I started going down the hole, and I was like, what's an NFT? Wait, what? And my background now in direct to fan and all that, for me, it was a light bulb moment of, wow, there's something here. Like, what a way to keep connected to artists and keep fans connected, and figure out how to monetize that. And for me, it's always been less about like profile pics and all of that. It's really been about what is the experience the tech can provide. And I still feel that way. I'm super bullish on all that. So I had my own company for over a decade. And so as an artist manager, I was also advising brands, and then started to advise brands in the Web3 space. And long story short, advised a fractionalized music royalties company, Songvest, and then had a call from a recruiter about, Pixelinks, and, went down that metaverse rabbit hole, and
So
here we are.
Songvest was Sean Pierce, right? Or Sean Peace.
Yep. Yep.
And he came out of Royalty Exchange.
Yep.
And I don't remember what happened to Songvest. I think they're still around, but
Oh yeah, they're still around. They're still seems to be working. I mean, they are still the only SEC Reg A Plus platform. So it's still a licensed security. So, I think there's a bunch of other platforms that have come around, and so, I mean, everyone talks about Royal, but I think people will argue, is that a security or not a security? Is it an unlicensed security or not? So I think it'll be interesting. I know there's, a few more companies about to launch in the new year, going after the same space. So I think as people have acquired catalogs and as people figure out what to do with catalogs, I think it'll be interesting. I think there's still some work and education to be done around fans jumping into that space, but Songfest seems to be like slowly getting it there.
No, I get it. I mean, I started Vest, and we were probably the
Oh,
first
okay.
to fractionalize music royalties back well, we launched in 18. We started the company in 16. So I know Anthony and other guys that were at Royalty Exchange in that period, and quite frankly, a lot of them took our. I saw our marketing materials, like, let's just say, directly copied. And I remember even we did a photo shoot and had like people with headphones. I mean, because I thought, oh, I could license images, or I could just go rent a studio and do a shoot one day and have 500 images that we own. And I don't think it was Songvest, but it might have been Royal. Somebody started using our own imagery. Like,
That's scary. I hope
these
it
aren't
wasn't
stock.
Songfest.
Nah, I said these aren't stock photos. These are our photos.
Right.
But yeah, we were early in the space, and it's like you said, still developing. There's some stuff I know that's on the horizon right now that we're dealing with that could change the way this looks. But I think you're 100% right, because this acquisition fury that has happened over the last, let's call it 3 years, $6 billion spent by institutionals, including PIMCO and BlackRock and places that you never think, KKR, like, what's KKR doing buying music rights? But they're seeing that there's an alternative asset class that isn't correlated to the market.
Right.
And I was just saying, I think that there's an opportunity there when you've got these big, especially institutions, they're looking at holding billions of dollars of catalog, and they've paid anywhere from 15 to 30x EBITDA on the values. So if they don't do anything differently, they're going to be 15 or 30 years just to break even. Whereas if they can change the valuation or the velocity in these transactions, there may be a way out of it. So we're talking to a couple of these guys, and there's a back end solution that I'll make public soon. But it is an exciting place to be. I think NFTs opened up the realization that artists and quite frankly publishers and other catalog owners will have a propensity to actually enter the market. Because somebody told me, well, I'll just say Zach Katz at one point said, Steve, no artist will ever deal with the public with regard to their rights. I was like, okay. And this is when he was at BMG. And then he went off into Ithaca, and he, did the thing with Scooter and whatever. And I had lunch with him maybe 6-7 months ago. And before he sat down, he said, so I'm tell you, I was wrong, because you guys saw this. He goes, you were early, but look at the NFTs now. He goes, there's nothing like artists that are putting stuff up and they are developing that direct relationship like you're mentioning. And he goes, I could see things going there. Now he's, I guess running FaZe
Clan now. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 100%. I think there's a lot of things that we didn't think we would see. And I think there's still, there's a few things you don't really see, because there have been some bad players. I think that these kind of major artists are now being slower to jump on the bandwagon, but also I don't think the value and the narrative around what the long-term utility and what the power of what they could utilize the tech for has been shared. I think, I always bring him up as an example because I think he's such a great example. I think Avenged Sevenfold and what Matt's done,
yep.
Who and really educated his fans and his community. That's really powerful. And so he's getting them to understand it and be on board with it. And his Death Bats Club is, as he continues to provide more value to that, then you can start to look at it like this really is sort of a fan club on steroids, but there's actually like real value to it. And I think as artists understand that, it's going to be explosive. And also this kind of idea of like retention and loyalty. I mean, any brand right now that's working in I mean, you're seeing Starbucks do it, right? So I think NFTs, tokens, all of that from a loyalty and reward and recognition standpoint, I think that's just untapped. I think that's what you'll start to see in the next, I would say sooner than later. Next couple of years, it's all going to be about loyalty.
I think you're exactly right, and especially with regards to like Dead Bats. I mean, it's about community, right? What we're
Yep.
seeing with Web3 and Metaverse is it's not just a one-to-one transaction. Web2 is all about, hey, I'm going to go on Amazon and buy something and it gets shipped to me. That's great, but I want to bring my family, my friends, my cohorts, I want to build something. I want to be in this tribe. And that's, I think, what's been missing. And it's very popular in music. Obviously, you go to a festival or a concert and there's 30,000 other people that love this artist or love that song. And you're sharing that experience with them. And that's that power that you'll pay $500 a ticket for, right?
Yep.
Otherwise, you just sit at home and watch the video or listen to the song. So there's definitely a human community aspect, I think, that's been overlooked for so long and maybe hasn't even been available for so long because of technology that's come about now, where you can, if you've got an artist like we're talking about M Shadows or Matt, where he comes in and says, hey, let's build this together, right? It's transparent in many respects. Like you said, it's a loyalty, gamified a little bit. So the people that participate more get more benefits. It allows creativity from outside music itself, right? There could be some artistic stuff, some content that's not really music related. But it allows fans to have a lifestyle that's related to their favorite artist or their favorite band, and in a way that they could never do before. And I think you're right. He's at the forefront of that. There's some other artists that are dabbling. I mean, Aoki and a lot of the EDM guys are working on, stuff that's similar, but I think as a band, he's probably one of the few that engages pretty wholly.
Yep.
Um,
And
and
he educates, and that's key. And I think it's this other thing. It's like what happens after the drop. And I think some of these artists that have tried it and I mean, it's, to me, it's not any different of, when you're running a fan club and it used to be like what happens after the concerts and the tour. The fan clubs, like they expand when there's a tour coming because people want the access, and they contract when there's no tour. But the value starts to become, if you build out that engagement through the whole process, which is what NFTs or tokens are going to allow, is this constant engagement. And so it's not easy for an artist, and artist teams, I think, are going to have to be more involved, but that's the community. That's what the community is looking for, is that. And so, it'll be interesting. I think artists that start to embrace it and have teams around them that can help them execute on that, that's the key. But because I think all these projects, particularly all these NFT projects that, they dropped and they're made all these promises, and obviously the crypto winters and all that, and people are like, oh, it's not worth anything. Well, that's because you put your value, you made a monetary value versus kind of the value of access or exclusive items or exclusive digital goods and kind of all these things that you could keep up. So I think I hope more companies do that, or else you do have these artists going like it's a rug pull, or it's a money grab or any of that.
Yeah, I think people could see through that many times. I think you're right. I mean, a lot of times the ideas come from the community, right? It'll be someone in there that goes, hey, what if we do this? Or, hey, there's 10 of us that love this. We'll build it for you. And I've seen that happen many times, where some node of that technology is going to come out of the community itself because they want to help the artists. I mean, you see this with K-pop all day long, right? You see people buying 5 copies of a digital release not because they like 5 copies of the digital. They can't use 5 copies. They want to support the artist. There's no other way for them to do it. So before they could, actually participate in physical goods, now digital goods, they would just say, here's my money, right? Just please make some more music for me because we love you. We see that, and those tribes are like, I can't even, I mean, I remember one of the first K-pop shows I went to, and after the show, the lights came up and the entire band came to the edge of the stage, and one by one, they were Korean. They took the mic and thanked the fans. They each talked for like a minute or two in some perfect English and some almost no English, but you could tell it was coming from the heart, right? It wasn't scripted. It wasn't, you got to get out there and do this. They really wanted to connect, and the fans stood there. They didn't leave. The lights were up. There's no more music, no more entertainment, but the artist was speaking and saying, hey, we really appreciate the fact that you guys came out. We really appreciate your support. We're going to do better. We're going to make more music for you. Here's what we're thinking about in the next couple years or 6 months, whatever. Here's some more plans. Please support us, please. And it was like, wow, I had never seen like a rock and roll artist ever do that. I mean, yeah, you get Springsteens and you get people that give a lot, but that, let's bring down the curtains, let's bring up the lights and have a conversation. That was like,
Yep.
whoa, what's happening?
Yep.
But think about the engagement, right? People came away feeling like they were connected versus, oh, show's over, I'm in my limo, I'm gone. This was better than a meet and greet. This was on a large scale, an opening of the artist, not to perform, but to appreciate and connect. And I think that's type of ethos, if you see that in a Web3 or metaverse project, that's where you're going to drive that community and build, from the heart. And we're seeing it already. All right. So how do you
Yep.
get to Pixel Links from management? They
Well,
scouted you, or from, you were at Songvest, right?
I was at Songvest, but I was still running my own agency.
Okay.
Recruiter reached out, had good conversations with the team. Felt like they were building something really unique in the space. I think the gaming component was the interesting part of that. I mean, it's interesting because I had a lot of calls at that time from different companies building out music metaverse experiences,
Yeah.
but it was really all about live and virtual concerts and all of that, which were sort of like, okay, so that feels very stunty. And while I think it's going to be a piece, and it'll continue to be a piece, but it'll be a piece, like I sort of see those kind of moments with artists doing concerts in the metaverse as sort of in conjunction with tours, like, right? Like maybe they, the first leg of the tour, they do all the major markets like they're supposed to do. And maybe there's a component where if you bought a ticket, there's a virtual performance. And if you're in Zimbabwe, you can catch it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's going to be in conjunction with live. It'll be interesting to see if any of those companies that are just standalone, live concert experiences will be around, because I think they have to work in conjunction. So I think what Pixel was doing was super interesting. I think they've got a really great team, and it's definitely, it's a game, like capital G gaming company, and that's the experience that they are building. And so it'll be interesting to watch that evolve from a music standpoint, and how will fans engage with that? I think
What do
there's a
you,
lot of
what do you think about that? Because my experience with artists, many of them, let's just call them purists, there's the Neil Youngs or whatever, but when you, and I totally agree with you that there's going to be an intersection of the gaming world and the decentralized platform world. And I happen to think that, and I see it already, you're gamifying, like, say, Sandbox, and Roblox is a game and Fortnite is a game.
Yep.
But what happens when an artist that's very much music driven and not a gamer is presented with, hey, here's your material, but by the way, we're going to chop and slice it into a game, or in order for a fan to get it, they have to jump through these hoops. I mean, how do you see that evolving? Because the artist I've worked with would barely approve a TV commercial. And I'll tell you a story where one of them, it was a very big auto manufacturer, a lot of money on the table. And they said, we're never doing a car commercial. Are you kidding? That's so whatever. 3 months later, Led Zeppelin approves, I think it was Whole Lotta Love, in a competing auto manufacturer's ad. I get a call. Hey, Steve, is that car company ad still available? I said, what are you guys, like, blowing in the wind? I mean, can you make up your own decision based on what you think, or do you have to just look at what Led Zeppelin does? And I get that, testing the waters, you want to kind of not be first sometimes, but it really was like, wow, guys, it was a lot of money. It would have been a song that was already recorded, really no skin off your back. You've never really exploited this song in this way before. It's a car, so it's not like a edgy product somewhere. In fact, you guys drive these cars. But it was just interesting to see how precious, and not just them, but most artists are very precious with their songs. So how do you see that? You're a manager, and we're on the label side, but do you see that gamification affecting the way artists have to look at their own music, or will a lot of them shy away from that?
I think, first of all, I think we don't know yet. Everything's still new from that standpoint, but I do think like it's how it's the lens you look at it with, right? So I think there are things that are companies like Pixelinks and others are building that are around like what is the next music experience, right? And similar like when music videos came around and MTV became a thing and everybody had to make music videos because that was the new platform and everybody jumped on board to make music videos and it changed music, right? Like we discovered bands. I mean, if you look at bands like, and I just watched the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame finally, because that the one that was on HBO. But if you really think about Duran Duran and Pat Benatar and the Eurythmics, and you think about how fashion and visuals and all of that were so crucial in defining their careers, and MTV was
Critical.
right. And so MTV played a huge role in that. So I think that's what's going to happen in these kind of these metaverse ideas. And does the gaming part of it, is that enough to change the experience? I'm not sure yet, you know, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think that as a fan, you want to experience an artist's music, but I think there's a pain point as to what that looks like, right? I want to go to the concert. I want to experience that because there's something about that community and being live. Maybe I'll go get an NFT because I'm a collector and that might be cool to own. Maybe I'll play the game once. Maybe I'll play it twice. Like, I don't know. Is there something in there I can get? Is there an incentive for me to continue to play? So I don't think the answer's there. I think it's really going to come down to like, is this an experience? Can I co-create with the artist in this experience? Is there something that's reciprocal in that experience? Is it something that helps me discover new music? Like, I think there's some low-hanging fruit that I think a lot of companies aren't addressing yet when it comes to these experiences, which is, you know, how do fans discover new artists' music? Like, that's a challenge. It's still a challenge. How do artists get more reach? Maybe it's going to be through reaching a different audience through gaming. We know that those lines are blurring. But, you know, I'm not sure yet on what the, you know, is Billie Eilish going to jump on board to a music metaverse gaming experience? I think they're all interested to see how it plays out. And I've had conversations with various artists over the last 6 months or so. And I think everybody's curious, but you don't see the outside of like Bieber doing that great thing, which again, is that a moment or is that a scalable opportunity? So I think it's too soon to tell, but I love that people are thinking out of the box. I love that people are thinking about how do we create better experiences for music, because, you know, DSPs and streaming is so passive and so lean back. And, you know, are there experiences to come along that are lean in and immersive and exciting? And so, yeah, somebody is going to build that. But again, I think it's going to be, that's going to complement all these kind of other things that are like, I don't know, traditional Web 2 artist marketing things. Like there has to be a bridge between the two. I mean, I can't wait till there's a better experience, but fans have to, I think fans are going to drive it anyway from that standpoint. And an artist that wants to take that leap of faith will drive it as well. I think the opportunities are huge, but it's what's going to stick.
I think you're absolutely spot on. And you're right. I love the MTV analogy because I was there for a lot of that. And it's, if you weren't part of MTV, you probably didn't have success during that period of time. And a band like Duran Duran in particular, which was very visual from day one, they would not have been Duran Duran without MTV, right?
100%.
There just wasn't that much spread. And
same with the Eurythmics. I think the same thing, you know, Annie,
true.
seeing that visual of Annie Lennox and that red hair and the androgyny, and like, it was just different. So you wouldn't have had that at radio, like, you know, so I think, so when I think in terms of that, I think there's so much opportunity, but there has to be this moment where moments become mainstream is the way to say it. And I think there's a lot of moments in Web3 right now, and how do you cross into mainstream, you know? And is that
Yeah, I think your audience, it's got to be audience driven as well. If there's no audience involvement, then it's an uphill battle. And I think that artists like you said, if they recognize that, and it is a little bit out of their comfort zone, but it's something that they have to do to get that connection and build that community, it's going to be necessary for them. All right, so you're out of Pixel Links.
Yeah.
What are you going to do, or what are you doing? Or are you continuing on that path, or what's going on with Knoller Group?
So we're working with some clients now, helping onboard artists into Web3. So that's our focus right now. Gonna fortunately able to take a little break and kind of see what sticks up until the new year. I think I'm fascinated with AI. We'll see how that all rolls out. But I think there's, my biggest thing, and when I've learned the last couple of years jumping into Web3, is that there's really an education a hole that no one's really filling right now. And so, I've had plenty of artists, and I'm talking major label artists that I have direct relationships with, saying like, if I can't explain it to my fans, how are my fans going to understand it? And so, I'd like to see, there's some opportunities that we have right now in my company to help those kind of artists on board and do that kind of education piece, because I think that's huge. And I think there's some things now that I'm also reminded after having all these conversations with various like tech companies and what people are building, which again, super bullish on all the excitement. There's still is like artists still have to have great songs, and nothing is going to break an artist right now outside of what has traditionally broken an artist, which is songs, 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 songs. So balancing that kind of like artist, I always say artist first and fan focused. And so if artists deliver the goods creatively, musically, have great songs, then all those other pieces that you help expand their reach and have more fans discover them is a lot easier. But you got to have the songs. I'm
You're
old
artist
school
driven.
that way.
Are you going to continue to manage?
No, I'm not going to continue to manage. I've kind of like, I signed an artist this year to Network Records, and that will be my last management client. So if you know any good managers, she's looking. She's amazing. I love her to death, and I just like, for me, I think management for me is it's a decade of grind doing it, and I love it. And knock on wood, I've had some really good success, and I've worked with some amazing bands, and there's nothing better than taking a band from zero to, having global success and platinum records. That's amazing. But I feel like that's not my calling at this point. But
It's
I do
hard
feel
to
like
do.
it's hard to do. Yeah.
And I think labels have become a little bit lazy with regard to just looking at followers or streams and going, oh, you've got 10 million streams, we'll sign you. Right. And that's the A&R process.
Yep.
But yeah, there's a lot more variables also. All these platforms, you also, like you said, you almost have to be an expert in each one of them. And you've got to engage in as many of them as you can at the same time. And that's daunting. Unless you build a team that's very savvy, I think it's very difficult to take advantage of those things.
Yep. I'm happy to help advise clients on onboarding into all these like new technologies and what platforms make sense. It doesn't make sense for everybody to do an NFT. Maybe there's a token there, maybe there's, so I think there's some interesting opportunities there. Also advising labels from that standpoint as well. Some labels are going to lead this space, and some are like, they're doing all these deals because it's sexy to do some of these deals, but there's another piece of it, which is, that's the hilarious part to me for a lot of this, is all these companies that are doing these big deals and then nothing happens. You're like, well, what happened? I thought they created this whole thing, and then either it doesn't launch or nobody's like, oh, well, we don't have the team to execute it, but it was a great marketing bullet and a great press release. So
what do you think about brands? Because I've always thought, if the label's a bank, so is, Balenciaga. So is Ford Motor Company. I mean, why wouldn't a brand align with an artist that makes sense? If it's, say Ford F-150 pickups and you've got a country artist that serves that market, doesn't that make more sense than signing to Sony? I mean, do you see that moving anywhere in the metaverse?
That's an interesting question. So you mean where like a brand would kind of sponsor an artist and fund it? And yeah, I think those things, I think artists that probably stay independent and, I mean, I think is Breland independent? He might be. He's a
I don't
country
know.
artist. He's got a deal with one of the car companies. I don't know if he is independent or not. I think he might be though, but where you could start, I mean, here's the thing. This is what and I just wrote something on a blog about this. I think the definition of success for an artist today gets to be defined by the artist, because if you sign a deal and you're $500,000 unrecouped, but you have a top 10 record, or you're $1 million unrecouped, by the way, and you have a top 10 record, that might be success for you. And that might be success for the label. Or you've released an NFT and you sold 5,000 of them at $100 a pop. And now you've put that money in your pocket, now you can go on the road and you don't have to take tour support. Maybe that's more successful, and so that definition of success changes. So I do think if there are opportunities for artists to get funded by other companies to do their art, I think that's amazing. But there is that fine line between, you need to then define success, right? Do I think a car company is going to make you a global superstar and understand the ins and outs of what that is, and massive radio campaigns and all of that? No, because I still think there's like things that go on the record business that are nuanced, that I don't know if you could become a global superstar without it. But look at Chance the Rapper, right? No label.
Sure.
So a good example.
I mean, there's label services companies like Downtown and any number that you want to hire a promotion staff, a marketing staff, a sales staff. I mean, those things are just guns for hire at this point. So if you had a great manager that said, I'm going to basically quarterback this label, Ford Motor Company is going to put in $2 million or 10 million, whatever the number is. We're going to hire this, go. Right? No competition. Ford's going to feature you on every ad they have, right? I mean, think about the ad spread that Ford has globally, right? It's going to blow away what any label spends on any artist, probably all of them put together. I'm just, I've always thought that and thought, why aren't more people partnering with, again, contextually relevant brands, not some brand that doesn't make sense, but if you're a country artist and you drive that car, why not, why not have the support of that brand if there's a synergy there?
If you want to have pop success, you need radio.
It's true.
I think, I've had a couple of friends who have some pretty successful alternative bands. They've had #1 alternative records that haven't moved the needle on anything. So, I think for massive global success, radio is still playing a role. I haven't seen that change.
That's absolutely true. And it's diminishing, I think. And I know the revenues, they're talking about paying, performers now for radio plays, which I think is going to, yeah, they should. That'll pass. And that could be a huge bump in revenue. And it could kill a lot of radio stations. I mean, it's so crazy. Even on podcasts, you'll notice if it's a radio network supported podcast, they play like any music they want. They have a Beatles song as a theme. I'm like, wow, if I had to license that theme for a podcast, that'd be like $10 million. There's no way they're getting I Want to Hold Your Hand for their theme song. But because they're under the umbrella of Infinity or, pick a network, they could just play whatever they want. And somehow it's now on a podcast that's not on the radio, but they're still using these music license without licensing it. There's going to be a reckoning for sure, but it is cockeyed. And if you don't know, European and most outside US markets compensate performers for their songs being broadcast on terrestrial radio. And that's not the case in the US right now. There's some legislation that's pending that we think may change that. And it would be a huge push. But I've always wondered why Google or Facebook or Apple doesn't just go in and hire an entire, they could decimate the record industry. They could hire the head of promotion at every label and still have money left over for lunch and control radio in a way that nobody else can, right? Google could walk in there and say, I'm head of promotion at Sony, head of promotion at Warner's, head of promotion at Uni. Come here. We're going to triple your salaries. Now we control radio, right?
Yeah.
And they would. They haven't done
Probably.
it. And I don't know why they haven't done it, but they just haven't done it to this point. So interesting concepts. I want to thank you for coming on today. I know it was short notice, but you hopped on very quickly, and it was great to discuss a lot of this stuff with you and go through your background, because I know we have similar experiences in some of the label stuff and some of the artist management stuff. And I'm really curious to see what you're working on next, because I know there's a lot of stuff percolating in there, and opportunities, like you said, are super, super rampant right now, and early days, right?
Yeah, definitely early days. Well, I appreciate you having me on, and it's been a pleasure getting to know you as well. So we do have similar, now we have to have an off podcast conversation about how our paths are similar.
Absolutely. All right, Kimberly, very good to talk to you today. I will catch
Thank
up
you.
and send you a copy of this as soon as it comes out.
Amazing. Thanks, Steve.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.